All right.
Awesome.
We're here.
Hi, Derek.
We are.
Hello.
Lucky number 7.
Hi, Sammy.
Could be our potential last show of the year,
Yeah.
depending when this launches and releases. So
Happy holidays.
We're winding this crazy year down.
Yeah.
Crazy cybersecurity year down.
It's been a wild one.
It's been a lot of everything.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting things, a lot of good stories, a lot of
Headlines.
Basics
Stories.
that I think we're still out there.
Yep.
Statistically, the most growth in pretty much all sectors. All black hat kind of sectors, gray hat sectors. So it's
even with the not to go into crazy doom and gloom, but people being laid off and some shrinkage there. I don't think the cybersecurity market's going to really change.
No,
it's still hackers don't sleep, as we say.
Correct.
Right? Probably more opportunity.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to the topic of today's show, which is let's have some fun. Let's play a little predictions game. What we think is going to happen in the next year or so with cybersecurity. I have some ideas around mine. I'm sure, John, you have yours, and Sandy probably has some really interesting ones. So
maybe a few.
Who wants to go first with your first kind of prediction into 2023 here?
Well, I'll start with one that I'm pretty sure it's already ongoing, but it's going to continue even further, and that is the rise in the number and sophistication of IoT, Internet of Things attacks.
I like that.
Okay.
Well, I don't like that, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think as we're starting to, and not to say that we've remediated the attack surface globally, but I do think that as we're starting to move away from classic network vulnerability or system level vulnerabilities, and of course they still occur,
right.
One of the forgotten about vectors is the IoT. And most IoT developers don't patch their systems regularly. They don't have any kind of, I guess, like I mentioned, continuous patch management process. And so for a target, for a hacker, it's a prime target.
Yeah. That's an awesome point. It kind of takes me back, to what you're saying. It has been sort of forgotten, right?
Yeah.
We talked a lot about IoT 2020, 2019.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot of botnets around it.
We don't talk about it now because there's so much else to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, Sammy, with IoT, and when I think IoT, I'm thinking, thermostats, garage door openers, sprinkler systems, things like that, where you're essentially buying IoT said product, bringing home, box cutter to the box, take out, plug in, and you never think about it again.
That's right.
Right. And so I think that is it might sound very basic, my follow on to what you're saying here, Sammy, but I think to the layman, that needs to be understood.
Yeah.
Security is.
Well, there's a whole ongoing joke, right? What's the S stand for in IoT? Security. Well, there is none, so there you go.
I like that. I like that.
But yeah, you're right. There's a lot it's also kind of like holiday time. People are getting new gifts. You got baby monitors, you got speakers, you got smart light bulbs, everything could be IoT. And I was kind of joking and ask people well, when was the last time you updated your TV or your toaster oven?
Right.
Or your washing machine? Mm-hmm. Well, never. Okay. Well, all these things are running, very basic, crude, old school, just generic,
on your
Linux
network.
kernels on your home network.
On your home network.
That can have access to whatever, they're phoning home to. How do you know where they're phoning home to? No clue.
Yep.
Could be anywhere.
But I'm sure, Derek, everybody sets up a separate IoT network on their home.
Oh, of course.
Right? Okay,
everyone
just
does.
making sure.
You guys don't
just
segment
making sure.
immediately upon install from AT&T? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have 25 VLANs, ACLs in between.
Don't bring my mom into this conversation again.
Yeah.
She's a common. She makes a common appearance.
VLAN expert.
She does not have an IoT network at home.
But I can definitely agree with that statement that there's going to be another, continued uptick in, IoT trends and, these large scale botnets that were being used, video cameras to be, used for DOS attacks or, command and control type stuff as well. So, I can see that one.
It's all about low hanging fruit at the end of the day, right? And when that becomes the simplest vector because nobody patches it, and there's pretty much no regulation. So that's part B to this, right?
Because they make it very hard to patch too. It's there's no button to say, update my toaster. It's
right.
But I thought we were talking 2 and 3 years ago about bringing regulation into the IoT market.
Yeah.
Well, here we are.
And,
It still
once
hasn't
again,
happened.
here we are. Right.
Still hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see it happening on, say, like the medical side first.
Yes.
Maybe in that
100%.
trend,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
IoT in your pacemaker.
Where
Like
the risk is
eh.
much higher.
Or
Yep.
actually, I could add to what you're saying is IoT in cars. A lot of these cars are fully connected, and we've seen a lot of, DEF CON talks about, connected cars. And I actually saw an article recently about certain models that had a Sirius XM. They were able to breach and actually turn the cars off and on. That's a little scary while driving. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's an open invitation for regulation.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's coming. Maybe slow, but
Yeah, well, start with the critical stuff,
Yeah.
and then kind of work your way down. And even like your smart meters and power grids to your house, like your solar. For those of you that have solar and your batteries, like those are all connected.
Yep.
What if I can turn off your breakers to the house? All right, well, that's kind of cool. And hold you for ransom in the dark.
game on, Elon.
Lots of things, right?
Oh, hey.
Challenge
Elon,
accepted.
This is an Elon-free zone.
We like Elon. We're all good.
No,
we
of
don't
course
have
we
any helicopters flying over us
Of
yet.
course we do.
Tesla
Sounds
helicopters.
like I'm not so sure.
He's staying awful quiet.
I
over
know
there.
his online alias.
His FBI days are coming in now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
He's on the list.
So, John, what do you got for us?
Yeah,
What's
so
one of your
I would
predictions or
say,
two?
thank you, Derek. Mine's not as sexy per se, right? But being
right.
in CISO world and in vCISO for here with Triden Group, I really think privacy is going to be the primary topic of conversation across essentially the security landscape. I talk to security leaders every day now,
Right.
and before, and I ask that privacy question.
Yeah.
Is privacy your charter? Majority know if it is or it isn't, which is
Right.
that alone is a scary statement that they don't all know.
Yeah.
That's true.
But what do January 1st, 2023, CPRA goes live,
Yeah.
here in this state, California. And there's a lot of mandatory, minimum requirements that come with that. Here we are, December 6th?
Yeah.
That people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
And so that's going to be huge, the privacy concerns and how that plays into security, and how security leaders are thinking about it. And then, with that is going to be regulation.
Yep.
We already have a lot of regulation, of course. We just
Sure.
talked a little bit about it. But, I think as the government is forced more and more, and here, again, John's opinion,
Right.
but as the government gets forced more and more into this security conversation, and what are you doing to protect, the American people?
Right.
I think the response on government, from my experience over the last couple of decades, is to increase regulation.
Okay. Yep.
And I think there's an opportunity, a perceived opportunity in the security space and information security to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's just a continuation of what's already being done with SOX and, FDA, SEC,
Enhancing those types of things. Right?
exactly, and just kind of doubling down.
How do you think that immediately impacts organizational security initiatives, right?
Yeah, great question. I think it helps drive strategy. I think a lot of organizations and leaders are frozen, paralysis by analysis. Like,
Yeah.
how do I go about designing my security program? But so they don't know where to start, right? So if they're presented with, regulatory requirements, that's at least going to give them some kind of a written roadmap.
Yep.
To at least get started.
Right.
Yeah. And which ones apply to me, and which ones do I, when do we address these different controls, and when do they go in effect, and a lot of those types of questions. So I think quick answer, you can almost immediately work it to your benefit.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
And I think per industry it'll be unique to see the different rates of implementation.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay, so we got a little bit more on the technical side, and a little bit more on the policy side.
Process. Yep.
Process. I have several, but I'm going to kind of pick one.
All right. Let's hear it.
I think you're going to see continued, a lot of influence from the cyber insurance carriers.
Yep.
Like we see it already now, and I can see that trend just skyrocketing, right?
Yep.
Because they're the ones that are really fighting fire the day to day with the ransomware operators and payouts and paying for all the downtime. And we've learned a lot this year about, how the insurance carriers really operate, what their risk is, what they look for, and even some of the kind of hidden things they pay out that you may not realize as part of the whole business. If your business affects somebody else, if your network is compromised, how the third party can come after you. So I think we're going to see two things, right? One is the insurance carriers keeping to kind of drive, I'll call it innovation, which is really just like doing the bare bones, in my opinion, for companies, which is great. And I think you're going to have some companies that are going to almost say, you know what, maybe the cost of my premium is too much. Right. I'm going to take that risk.
Yep.
And I think we're going to see some
Risk
people
tolerance.
say, hey, is this policy worth this money? They might say no. And that could lead to a whole nother can of worms because, if something does happen, that's when could be a, what do we call that? A RGE, resume generating event in some cases, right?
Right.
If things do happen. Yeah. So I think we're going to kind of see that trend still of the insurance carriers in a positive way, in my opinion, kind of help drive cybersecurity adoption just by forcing their hands.
I totally agree. I would say that to that point, Derek, it's not just insurance, right? I mean, we just, I talked about privacy, you're saying insurance, and I think
the same thing, really.
There's a lot of drivers.
Yeah.
And the common denominator for a lot of the, the topics that we deal with on a daily basis, the common denominator is information security.
Right.
And if it takes the directives from your insurance carrier to get you where you need to be, that's fine. It doesn't matter really what the journey is. The destination is the important.
Yeah.
It's more interesting to analyze which industries and which organizations are motivated by which avenue, right? Is it regulation that's putting it on them and putting the pressure, or is it insurance? And I think
privacy law.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So how are you?
Everyone's got a different scenario on that because if it's more, I would say maybe a heavily regulated company like more biotech or financial, very different conversation than a VC-backed startup with some cool app idea or technology. They're going to have a very different approach to, hey, maybe screw this, but my concern is this. So it's a good point.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what, what allowances organizations will have. There was recently that case where they were trying to designate ransomware as a terrorist type event, and therefore the company that was under scrutiny was not covered.
That's right.
And so now I think we'll start
act of war.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. Yes, exactly. So I think that's the exact terminology they use in the article, and it'll be interesting to see those more clearly defined and how organizations operate as a result of that. Because if you're on the hook for ransomware or you're off the hook, it's going to completely change your spend for your entire security budget. So seeing those definitions is going to, I think, change the face of the
That's
game.
a good point. You're going to see it almost evolve into very specific language. Like they might even get specific, like what type of ransomware it is. If it's a new variant or an existing or.
Do they have a key for it publicly
exactly,
available or
right?
not? Yeah.
I think you're going to see, because the goal is obviously the carriers to not pay out the money, right? So they want to be very specific and niche and tight. And I think even COVID in some ways exploited a lot of that. This global pandemic, people were using that to get out of all kinds of crazy contracts. And it's like, well, it's in there. And then okay, yeah, now it's like, well, crap, we got to modify the verbiage. And I think security is the next big thing there, right? Critical infrastructure, stuff like that.
Yeah. What a conflict of interest insurance companies have to deal with, huh?
So I would say another, and I know you said you had many, Derek, and I'm afraid to ask you what those are because you're going to steal my idea.
You can go, John. Just
Thank
kidding.
You. I appreciate that. Supply chain and third-party risk.
Yeah.
Right. Supply chain is, everybody knows the phrase, everybody knows the term.
Yep. That was a big one this year.
Yeah. I don't know that everybody has really factored that into their strategic roadmap per se. Well, another way of the way that I view supply chain risk is third-party risk management.
Right.
Right. I mean, I understand supply chain. We could be dealing with vulnerability, riddled
more
software.
of a technical supply chain, but there's still a lot of other factors of supply chain.
100%.
Yeah. For me, supply chain and third-party risk are those risks that are somewhat outside of your control.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's outside of my house, but if I have a really well secured house in a very bad neighborhood, there's still a pretty big threat. you know, that I'm living in daily. And so I think focused or hyper attention to third-party risk management is something that I see more and more of coming into 2023.
The other thing too, I think just for kind of clarification is like when we say third party, it doesn't necessarily mean like one hop away. It could be 4 hops away.
Exactly.
It could be a third party of a third party of a vendor that gets your way in. You're like, oh crap, I never thought about that. You know, we were having a conversation today at lunch with somebody, and that topic kind of came up, and it was like, yeah, like you could be 4 layers in, and then that specific targeted company gets breached because they make a certain part, and this part goes in here, and then
the 5 degrees of security separation.
Yeah, it's the 5 degrees.
Not Kevin Bacon anymore.
I like that idea actually.
Right.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good one, I would say.
Yeah, I couldn't actually agree more with that, especially when you consider that most people have we're just so heavily integrated with each other nowadays, and most people have no idea who they're integrated with. They may be using technology that they're not even aware that they're providing that kind of sensitive data to. So you almost have to take inventory of your...
Well, it's, it comes down to like asset management.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, it's asset /third party. It's just another asset that you manage.
Right.
That's something you talk about all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We talk about it from like the more of the technical, like, hey, how many computers and bits and bytes and IPs, but you're like, well, how many vendors do you work with?
Right. Or I can only secure what I know about.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like a manufacturing company or retail, there's thousands of vendors they work with, 100%. And it's just like if you think of like a spider web, right? You're 1,000 vendors times another 1,000. Yeah. That's a big net.
Yeah, and not to throw any companies under the bus, but it's honestly incredible to see how even the highest technical authorities in an organization often don't even know what the breadth of that scope is. Yep. You know, they're like, oh, well, I don't know how many APIs, third-party APIs we're using. I'm like, that's kind of an important...
right.
You're sending out, customer data through it.
Yeah. It's like you definitely have to know your risk and know your environment. Like, know your environment and then know your business as well, right?
Right.
That's a big one.
Just good stuff. Biting my tongue. Like we know... Yeah, I mean, right now, we're just talking the top layer of the onion.
Right.
Identifying all of your APIs, all of your assets... Once you've got that identified, and of course, I don't want to take this podcast in a direction of third-party risk management, right? But I'll finish my thought. So once we have everything identified, then we now have to classify that data.
Yeah.
What data is most important to you? How do you prioritize that data? Do you have confidential data, public data, sensitive data? And you can just keep going and going and going and peeling that onion until you're just down to the
requires scalpel
stinky yellow core.
Yeah, that's one of our favorite questions to ask a customer, though, and I do that on purpose. Like, depending who we have on the call or in the room, you ask the question, "What's the most sensitive data to you?" Mm-hmm. If you ask the IT guy, he's going to say one thing.
Yep.
You ask the HR person, they're going to say something different.
Yep.
You ask the CEO, they might say something completely different. You're like, okay, well, that makes sense because like that's your differentiator.
Yeah.
So having that kind of also everyone marching in the same order. Just as important for the data standpoint. So
that's why it's so important that you need the IRP team go ahead.
And a great topic for tabletop exercising.
Yes.
Yeah, it's something you have to practice what you preach.
Yep.
That's actually a good trend. I would say I think is going to continue for next year is people taking tabletops more seriously, in my opinion.
I agree.
Like personally, like we're seeing a large uptick in it and people taking it more serious now. And it's just like any sport or anything you do, practice makes perfect, right? I mean, some people might think it's kind of silly. It's usually awkward the first time you do it. It's new. It's kind of weird, and it's kind of funny, like when we run them and things like that. But once you do it a couple times, it just becomes a little bit more muscle memory. You're more relaxed, and obviously, in like the real world, when it hits the fan, like you're gonna be panic mode. But you can at least be like, yeah, here's the IR plan we used. Right. What did we do that last time? Okay, cool.
Right.
And we've seen that tried and true, honestly.
And for that, for those listening, I used to look at tabletops as, it was kind of a fun thing to go through. It's kind of almost like a team building event.
Right.
Right. Now what I'm seeing almost to a company and to a client, because we always ask, right, why are we doing a tabletop?
Right.
Let's ask that question up front so that we can craft it appropriately. And almost to a company, we want to make our incident response plan better, bigger, stronger, faster.
Yep.
We need to figure out what are we missing, what needs to be tuned,
what don't we know, or what we're not thinking about.
Yeah, because the IRP, that plan, is a living document, and the companies and the security teams and leaders that understand that are so far ahead of the game.
Yes.
So you mean I'm not supposed to just leave it on my desk for 2 years or
Version
take it out?
Version
Version
1.0.
1.
Dust off.
And it says draft on it.
Beta.
Exactly.
Dust,
This is the noise. This is the noise of dust leaving the plant.
Yeah, and then we're all remote, and everyone's like, I don't have a copy of it. It's on my desk in the
Right.
filing cabinet, pushed in the back drawer with floppy disks. Okay, yeah. Probably time to dust that thing off.
Yes. Yeah. Practice a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Kinda
so
calls
I'd say that's a good one. Another one I think we're going to see more of is like MFA fatigue, those types of attacks. I mean, we've seen it now, and I would say a couple years ago, people weren't that like brazen to try it because they're like, well, no one's going to click this if I just keep spamming them. But we've seen confident attacks happen because of that, and depending on the, let's say the age range of the person doing the attacking, they don't give a what. Just keep hitting that, MFA bombing, and someone's going to be like, fine, accept, and things like that. So I think that's going to be a little bit of a trend every once in a while, and I think that comes down to a lot of education and user behavior analysis and things like that. But it could be a interesting one out there. So
100%. I think that's coming. I think you can even expand on that and just say social engineering is going to double down as it always does every year. It just doesn't stop. But to specifically about MFA fatigue, it's like when you finally find the fix. This is just how security works. Like when you finally find the solution, that's what gets focused on. So now everybody's looking to exploit the elements of MFA, and that being one of the most common elements. And most organizations at this point don't have proper IAM policies in place. So as long as you can get 1% of employees and they have terrible segmentation,
just takes one.
Right, and it may not be directly from that employee to the goods, and maybe from them to another, to a vendor, right, to the email, right.
It's third-party risk, see?
Exactly, yeah. So
the 4 degrees of security separation.
Right.
I thought we were saying it's 5. We're going
5?
4 now?
Well, it was, Kevin Bacon was 5. So
so why not? Let's just keep it going.
Right.
5 it is.
We need some shirts made.
Yeah, there you go.
I like this.
Well, I got one interesting kind of fun one for 2023, and I think this just goes along with the rise of ransomware and just criminal groups becoming far more organized. It's funny because cryptocurrency is always labeled as private, anonymous, but in reality, most transactions can be observed in the blockchain, and now they have blockchain investigators and detectives that go through thousands and thousands of transactions to pinpoint exact wallets belonging to people. I think we're going to start to see layer 2 protocols built on top of cryptocurrency, like
I like
Bitcoin,
where you're headed.
that enables privacy, essentially.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and what that's a double-edged sword, right? Because adversaries can use it for the malicious intent, but I think it's incredibly important, and right now it doesn't really exist.
Right.
You can look at every transaction.
It's still wild west in a way, and like you said, people assume it's one way because they don't really understand it, but I mean it's all traceable in a certain way if you know how to look and know what you're looking for. It's different than even like cash. I mean, cash can change hands, and it's like you can't physically track it. I mean, unless there's some secret FBI thing we don't know about, John. But I don't know if you can tell that story.
No,
that's a different story for another time.
That right
Sounds like we got the dollar radar.
He's like hit mute. He's like mute show.
So was that the direction you were hoping I was going?
That was awesome. Yeah, no, that's that's a good one.
A little fun one. That one's more for the adversaries out there.
Yeah, I was going to say fun is in the eye.
You got to
of
have
the
both
beholder.
sides.
Right. But
it's the constant cat and mouse game.
Yeah. Well, I think the world needs some degree of privacy when it comes to finance, but we just have to find that middle ground where can't be exploited or manipulated.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's a topic for people. Definitely like on their minds. Right. So.
Right. Yeah. So
lots of good stuff. We'll see how accurate we are when it comes time. We'll kind of
do it again next year.
You heard it here first.
We'll do this show at the end of next year and see like how many we got or didn't get and kind of turn into something like that.
Winner gets a beer.
We'll have a poll or something later. We can post something. So. So with that, everybody, appreciate your time. We're kind of wrapping up the show.
Yeah,
and
thank you, everybody.
Continue to tune in. We'll be doing this, still ongoing in next year and rocking and rolling.
And happy holidays.
Yes,
to
happy
you
holidays.
too.
Yeah,
right?
likewise.
And to everybody watching and listening.
Yeah,
really can't thank you enough for caring enough, right, about security.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Sammy, you said, I'll just finish with my final thought.
Let's do it.
What the world needs now is, what'd you say, privacy and
Can't even
It doesn't
recall.
matter what you said because I thought you were going to say, and I was hoping you were going to say, what the world needs now is love, sweet love.
I like it.
I
There we
agree.
go.
For the holidays.
And
so,
cybersecurity.
yes,
I
and
couldn't agree
cybersecurity,
more, sir.
and VCSO, and TG
Yes.
Secure,
Yes.
and Triden Group.
And
All bundled, but packaged with love.
Exactly.
And one last holiday tip: watch your credit cards. Don't
Please.
get scammed at Target
Yes.
or wherever else you're going to
Yes, and be wary of your emails.
go. Yes. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.
Take care.